we are. Nick's going to show us a little bit about advanced capture and some of the things that have come out in OnBase 13 and some of the more recent deployments. So, with no further ado, let's just kind of jump right in.
So what we're going to be taking a look at here is the Intelligent Capture for AP, or ICAP for short. And so what we can do to sort of kick that process off is just sweep in a batch here. So we have 7 invoices that we're going to be taking a look at today. So what it does is it looks on the whole document for those sort of standard tags, and it makes its best determination of what that value is. And so in this case, we can see that we get our highlight here, and we have the value provided over in there, but we have that green highlight over the keyword panel.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that it's found this value with absolutely no training. So there's no user sort of interaction to reinforce this behavior. It's just found it. So what it's saying is, here's my first attempt at this, but I've never seen this vendor before. I have no training data, so you need to double check this for me this first time through. So as the user, all I need to do to double check this information is take a look, and I can see that the information is correct. So in order to train the environment, all I need to do is do nothing. So I just go ahead. I go ahead and I click
so
index.
I can do my job by doing nothing.
Exactly, it's pretty nice. So
it's pretty cool.
So what we've done is by clicking that index button, I've reinforced that behavior. So I didn't change any of those values. So the tags that led us to capture those values accurately, even on documents we'd never seen before, is now reinforced. So we've provided training data via that user interaction. And what it does is, if you'll see, we have our vendor information as well, and it stores that training information for every single vendor. Because the types of things that are going to help us find vendor number for one vendor may not really help us at all on the next.
Sure.
So we need to sort of section that off. And what we do for the vendors is we take sort of the vendor files that exist in those ERPs, and we bring those into the environment. So then as we find things like the phone number or the address, the web URL, things of that nature, when we find those consistent structured values, we can say, okay, we know that this is LiftsRS, and in our environment, the LiftsRS vendor ID is 10037.
Cool.
Because the difficulty often is that vendor name isn't really preceded by a nice nifty tag like vendor name :
Sure.
Usually it's in big logos, something that's probably usually closer to an image than even text that we could read. So instead of relying on that, we can use things like phone numbers, addresses, those.
So like here, you're probably looking at this address as opposed to the pick me up.
And so we're looking for really all that data that helps us to find it. And the system can automatically update that vendor file twice a day, nightly, whatever makes the most sense for your environment. So we're always gathering the most up-to-date information from that ERP.
Cool.
So again, if we go ahead and say index, in this case we have that orange highlight. What this is saying is that the tags were not sufficient to help it find a value.
All right.
And in this case, the reason for that is actually because this is a non-PO invoice. So there is no PO number on here, so it's presenting it to me as the user this first time. And there's a couple of ways that we could train this system. If this were an environment where we had separate document types for PO and non-PO invoice, by selecting that other document type, the software is going to remember that this vendor was reassigned as a non-PO invoice. In this particular example, we don't have those double invoice types, but what it's also going to do is, over time, learn that a missing PO isn't actually an issue. So in this case, we see it highlighted, but there's nothing really that we need to do about this, because it's, again...
So this is going to work for things like electric bills or emergency, emergency type of things, like, well, I guess this is an electrician maybe, or a plumber or something like that you don't cut a PO for. You just, that invoice showed up and you've still got a fair amount of information off of it.
Absolutely.
So that's great.
And so in this case, we still take that vendor information, and we're still able to save that this is a non-PO invoice. And so if we had a different document type, it's going to learn very quickly.
Yep.
But without that document type, it's going to learn slowly, and that's on purpose, because it may be a vendor that you get some PO and some non-PO from.
Okay.
So it's going to learn over time what it should sort of be defaulted to.
Cool.
So if we go ahead and continue through the batch that we've got here, you can again see that we get our highlights as we've seen on the other documents, just verifying that the information is correct. We don't really need to make any edits unless any of the information is not accurate on these values. So you can see here that even without any of the training information, we're still able to capture virtually every single keyword on this first pass of these untrained documents. If you'll notice, for this particular vendor, though, as we take a look at the invoice amount, we did not bring in that first value.
Okay.
An amount is one that's generally a little bit trickier because it has a tendency to float on the page rather than being in a fixed location like PO or invoice number maybe. So in this case, it's made its best determination. It's presented to us as the user. It's made sure that we're double checking this via those green highlights and the process. And so what we can do is we can fill in that amount a number of different ways. So if we go ahead and we clear this out, I have a number of different options. I can start typing in what I know to be the correct value.
And we're looking for it on the page
And
now.
it's going to give us
that's
information on the page as I type. So you'll notice as I just type the 1, it's highlighting everything in the document that begins with a 1. And it's giving us that information. You can see that in some cases we have a darker green or an orange highlight.
Sure.
And that's indicating the level of confidence that the software has for that accurate read. So it's saying that you can see there's some speckling in there. So even though we're able to automatically bring that value in without having to type it, it's just giving us information that, hey, you might want to double check this one. But as I type, I could certainly go ahead and select the value, and you can see that we get that flash to tell us which one we're working with, and I could hit enter. If I'm a user that's sort of more familiar with the mouse and doesn't usually stay on the keyboard all that often, I can go ahead and just click the total amount. So just by that single click, it
awesome.
brings in that value.
Very cool.
If, for example, we were working with, we needed to bring in a block of data, and that click didn't really give us what we wanted, the other option that we have is if we go ahead and we drag a value, it's going to bring in a whole block of text. So whereas that click is nice for a word or maybe a short phrase, if you're looking to bring in a large block of information, that drag is going to give you an easier way to bring
product description
that entire information.
Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
Or shipping instructions, or hey, that's awesome.
So we can go ahead again and just click to index this value. And by clicking that value, the software is going to take into account the fact that I've changed that value, and it's going to take into account where that value is.
So you're not starting from scratch each time. It's learning.
Correct.
It is definitely learning.
Absolutely.
But it's learning from indexing. It's learning from your actions.
So the user interaction is training it. And there isn't a separate training step. There's not an extra place that users need to go to train the system and do more work. Just by doing sort of the work that they need to do here, it's going to train the system to be more accurate. And we'll see how accurate it is in the next pass through. So again, if we just hit index and take a look at some of the other documents we have here, we can see that we're getting the right information on these. So as I hit index, it's asking me if I want to review this batch. We don't need to take a double check at anything, so we can go ahead and say no. If we go ahead and bring in that same batch again, so this time we're bringing in that same batch of documents, but this time with training data.
Okay.
We can go ahead and sweep it back in. See that it's already immediately in the Intelligent Capture for AP, so we're already processing it on that server. We have our other batch that is in awaiting commit. That's the first one that we brought in.
Okay.
So if we go ahead to our batch processing, refresh, so we can see that this is the new batch. And if you look, the only one that needs to be indexed is a single document. So before we had those 7 that needed to be verified because they didn't have any of that user training data. Here we have just one that's necessary. If we right-click in index to take a look why,
it'll be our non-PO.
And this is our non-PO. So again, this is something that would be trained over time to default to that non-PO type, or if we had set up a separate document type.
Well, that's pretty nice down here. You can see the status of each individual item in your batch, and I guess those check marks say that we're good. We don't need to worry about it, and we're on the one that's not highlighted.
Absolutely. And if we had any other value that had a difficult time reading the value, even if it had extracted a proper tag, it would present those with any issues to a user, really to make sure that we're getting the most accurate data. And if we take a look at the BioBase, we can see that it is getting that proper value now. So based on that user interaction before, where we brought in that 20 as its best determination of the total, now we have that 19,000 instead. So it's taken that user triggered interaction, that single click we did, and it's used that to learn the location of the amount for this vendor. So that's really the process for the Intelligent Capture for AP, sort of from bringing the documents in and how they look at a very first pass without any training data, and then how we utilize even a single invoiced batch to train the system to really be more accurate each time through.
How much, if any, configuration options are there? Can you tweak confidence levels and mess with I guess image processing that probably happens before this, but is there how much of that do you have control over?
So the process itself is meant to be very light on configuration. So all of those tags that we discussed are all part of the product. It's not something that you need to add in. We certainly have control over that for those unique customers, unique environments that maybe have tag sets that are not one of the typical ones, but we've even tried to take into account the non-typical ones in our default tag sets. So really the initial setup for the product is really just to implement it into an environment from a traditional OnBase install point, and then provide it your vendor file. Other than that, there's not a lot of configuration necessary.
So walk me through that. It sounds to me like all I really have to do is put the server component of this in place, and I guess this is running through your Unity client. It sure looks to be.
Right.
Or is this a special client?
So this is the Unity client, and so for the user experience, we just plug into all the configuration that exists.
Okay.
Sort of the doc types, scan queues, things that already exist maybe in a manual process today. It's just a checkbox to say this is now an intelligent capture for AP process. And then we have a specialized server on the back end that's handling all this. It's just a very quick install. It's basically just hitting next a couple of times.
Once I've installed on the server and the user's got their UI, I'm done.
Right. The only thing that you really need to do is take that export from your ERP, and it doesn't need to be in any proprietary format. When we bring it into the system, we say that this value, traditional to any DIP process, really, we say that this is our address, this is our phone number, this is our fax number, this is our vendor name. However, it's come out of the ERP, and then we've been able to bring that in, and we can automate that from now on. So
very cool.
Every night, maybe the ERP provides that same file. We've already mapped to where those values are. We just bring it in and update all of our information there. So there's not really a lot of configuration there. As far as the confidence levels, we do have control of that at the keyword level. So we're able to set sort of that confidence to make sure that, if there's a keyword that's very, very critical, we want to make sure it's accurate every time. We can make sure that it has to be very sure of that value. Otherwise, it'll present it to a user.
Can you write a scenario where you have you need to have 100% confidence level or such? You put a value in that every time I see that keyword, a person will manually go buy it. So which effectively means that every invoice will get looked at, but maybe we're capturing 99% of the information off of it, and there's one field that it has to be right. It has to be right every time.
Right.
So we're gonna have somebody go through it.
And we can absolutely do that because we understand that some customers are very comfortable and have very easy vendors that they work with that have very clean data, and they're just comfortable with it going right through. And others are a little bit more meticulous and want to make sure they check every single value. So we're absolutely able to work with whatever the specific needs are.
All right. Well, hey, I appreciate your time, and thanks for showing it to us.
At Results Engineering, we work with organizations on every enterprise content management project imaginable. Whether you're researching options for your first ECM solution, looking to change enterprise content management platforms, or need to resolve a business or technical problem, we can help. Click on the contact link below to get in touch, or visit us online at www.reeng.com. The Results Advantage. Your advantage.